Hey, it's Vic Dorfman, founder of MemberFix, co-founder of MemberHost, and today we're going to resume our series about not getting burned by developers and getting what you want when you're hiring help for your WordPress site and for your membership business. And today we are discussing going fixed price versus going hourly or on a retainer basis. Why should you do one or the other? Now, from your perspective, you as the customer, probably 9 out of 10 times, you're going to prefer, for obvious reasons, to have a fixed price project. And that's completely understandable. You want to know, first of all, you don't have an unlimited budget, right? Maybe you have a budget of $5,000. That's the maximum amount you can spend. You know that you want to get XYZ for $5,000. Fair enough, right? If you're working on an hourly basis, you can't control costs quite as well, can you? Because if it's hourly, it could be 100 hours, it could be 1,000 hours, and depending on the hourly rate, your costs can spiral out of control. Alternatively, there's also a way to work on a retainer basis. Some people work on a performance basis, but that's quite rare. That's more so when you're starting a business with somebody or partnering with somebody. You either work for free, you put in sweat equity, or they're kind of fringe arrangements that we're not really going to discuss today. We're going to discuss the common arrangements, which are hourly work and fixed price work. So the thing with a fixed price work, let me just give you a little bit of context about my experience on the agency side, right? One of the reasons I love these conversations is because we're able to put ourselves in each other's shoes. The customer gets to see the perspective of the developer or the agency and vice versa. And that allows you to sort of effectively price the market, if you will. And so one of the things that we discovered, and I've been doing MemberFix for over a decade, is that initially we did a lot of fixed price projects. Customer comes to us, they say, hey, I want to do XYZ. We tell them, okay, we think it's going to cost this much. Nowadays we do a discovery process. If you haven't seen my video about discovery, or we call it analysis, then definitely check that out. But basically, we'd say, okay, this will cost $5,000. And they'd say, okay, deal. And then here are all of the things that we agreed to achieve for that $5,000. And if we did a really good job scoping the project out, it's very clear what's expected. The difficulty comes in when we say, hey, this is done, and the customer says, well, what about all these other things? I thought that was included, right? So you might have been in that position before where you had an interaction with a developer, you engage somebody, it might not even be a developer, it could be any kind of service provider, and then you pay them, and then you get back the thing, and you're like, hey, well, what happened to this whole other half? And they said, well, we never discussed that. And basically it creates friction and misunderstanding and frustration, and potential other unpleasant consequences. Again, a very detailed, very well done discovery process mitigates that to a large degree, and also setting good expectations mitigates that to a large degree. But in general, what we found is that when you agree to a fixed price project, it becomes a zero-sum game. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody doesn't benefit, but what it does mean is that to some degree, one party benefits at the expense of the other. For example, if it only costs us $500 to do this project, and we charge you $5,000. Now, you may be perfectly okay with that because to you, it's worth $5K. So you want the result, you'll pay $5K and you're happy because you got what you wanted for a price that you were willing to pay. Capitalism 101, right? But if you knew that it cost us $500 and you paid $5,000, you might be a little bit annoyed because, well, it's nice that you got what you wanted for a price you were willing to pay, but wouldn't it have been better if you got what you wanted for a lower price that you were even more willing to pay? Of course. So there's a inefficiency there. There's a lopsidedness there. Now, that's how business works. You have to make profit. You have to have enough profit margin to make everything worth your while on the service provider side. But what I'm saying is that in this scenario, the developer benefits, the service provider benefits disproportionately at the expense of the customer, even though the customer is otherwise happy, right? We're assuming that's the case. But the opposite is also true. Sometimes, especially if you mismanage expectations or you don't properly scope things out and really, really get super clear on what is involved in this project, you can be in a really bad position. We've been in this position a couple of times where we essentially agreed to do something and that something was vaguer than it should have been. And then so the customer, paid us whatever they paid us and we still weren't done. And then we realized it's so much more work than we ever bargained for. And then we come to the customer and we say, hey, this is like a lot of work. And they'll say, well, tough titties. We made an agreement and you guys have to finish the work. And of course, being professionals, that's exactly what we do. You don't ask, you don't get. So we still, in that kind of scenario, we would still approach the customer and say, hey, like, our bad. We mismanaged expectations. We thought it would be way simpler than it is, and it's actually super, super complex. It's going to take us like 100 more hours. Can you work with us? Can we essentially renegotiate the financial arrangements? And some customers who, let's say, are understanding or they feel that that's reasonable, they'll work with us, right? And again, this is not a situation that we're in ever actually anymore, because we stopped doing fixed price projects several years ago. But we actually had a project that dragged on for probably over a year because we agreed to something so vague and that we had to do what we said we were going to do, and then there was communication lag and whatever. So it took a long time because there was a board and there was approvals and stuff like that. But basically we lost money on this project, but we can't blame the customer. That's not their fault that, we agreed in a particular way and we shook hands, so to speak. And, we have to do what we say we're going to do. But my point here is that it puts the service provider in a dilemma. And 9 times out of 10, what will happen is that they won't do the right thing. They won't do the ethical thing and say, hey, we effed up, we have to own it, and we're going to, do this project to completion as agreed upon, even if it loses us money. What will happen more often probably is that they'll either essentially extort additional money from you and say, hey, if you don't pay us extra, we're not going to finish this thing. We're going to keep all the code. You get nothing. So now you're in a hostage situation, and now you're probably pissed, rightfully so, and you just want to get out of the whole thing. You might even scrap the whole project out of frustration and out of principle that you don't want to pay this person any more money, even if it means you wind up spending more money to go somewhere else. And we've had, unfortunately, quite a number of customers come to us to remedy that exact situation because they had poor experiences with random developers or random agencies. And that is a real thing. And so you have to be careful about that. And one of the ways to be careful about that, in my opinion, is to not agree to a situation that could wind up benefiting you at the expense of the service provider or benefiting the service provider at the expense of you, at your expense. It shouldn't be a zero-sum game. It should be a non-zero-sum game, meaning you both benefit, right? And you benefit to the degree that you're happy with the result. You're happy with the experience of getting the result. Your expectations are managed well, and you pay for the result something that you're okay paying. And if you weren't okay paying that much, you wouldn't pay it, right? But if it's clear up front that here's a range of what we think this project will cost, you have the flexibility also as the customer to make changes and pivots, which happens all the time. It's very, very common. That's another reason we don't do fixed price and why I don't really recommend this approach for you, even though you think you're saving money. But what's going to happen a lot of times is you're going to want the ability to change your mind on things and to add new requirements. And if you have a fixed price project where you've agreed on all of the requirements and the acceptance criteria and it's like set in stone, well, from the service provider's standpoint, they're thinking this is okay. I know approximately what it's going to cost us, and I know approximately what we're going to make if no additional requirements come in, if no weird contingencies creep up. And so the service provider is able to understand the profitability of the project if it's worth moving forward. And you're sort of able to understand, okay, I'm going to get this for this much. But as good as that sounds theoretically, and if you've been down this road, you probably have had these types of experiences. That sounds good theoretically, but it's actually a cage. It's actually a prison that deprives you of flexibility. The thing that allows you to keep your budget under control, the real linchpin here, is the quality of the service provider and the sort of level of values and integrity of that service provider. And this is where things like their reputation, a portfolio of their results, case studies about, like, nothing beats reputation and trust that you have with a partner who gives a shit. Pardon my French, but like, it's true. There are very many people who are developers who probably shouldn't be developers, who call themselves developers who are not really developers. And I'm not a developer. I'm by no means pointing a finger. I'm simply stating the fact that why are there so many people who have had poor experiences with various developers and agencies? And well, there are a lot of reasons for it, but certainly one of the reasons is the lack of integrity and the level of anonymity that comes with being able to simply like change your Upwork profile, start with a new name. We had a guy, just to give you an idea, we had a guy apply to be one of our team members who was supposedly from Bulgaria, and I got him on a Zoom call to do a screening call, and I could very clearly hear that the guy has a Chinese accent. And I have a very good ear for accents. I speak several languages, and I knew he was a Chinese guy. And so I just asked him, I said, "Are you a Chinese guy?" He said, "No, no, no." I said, "Could you please turn on your camera? I'd love to see what you look like." And he bailed. And I thought, that's such a weird, why Bulgaria? If you're going to impersonate some nationality, you may as well go up market and go to, impersonate an American or an Australian or something. It was just a strange scenario, but people do really unethical things when they're able to get away with it, essentially. And there's a lot of stuff like that happens in this industry. So it's not surprising and it's not uncommon when people get ripped off or taken for a ride. But the point here, I guess the crux of what I'm trying to say is that, in my opinion, and it depends on the size of the project, but in general, it is to your advantage to go on an hourly basis. But do insist, as I've spoken in a separate video, do insist on an analysis process or discovery process. Do insist on a range of price, a range of deadlines. Do discuss all of the potential problems that may come up, and make sure that you trust these people and that they're very, very transparent and they don't give you the willies, right? Like I talk about this all the time. Gut feeling is very, very important. Now, it doesn't mean that if you don't sense any kind of red flags from a person or an agency that they won't screw you. I mean, you can be wrong, right? But generally, I would say that your gut feeling, especially if you have a good breadth of experience, it's not going to lead you astray as much. Certainly not for when you're screening for integrity, right? You can generally tell what a person is about, what their values are in speaking to them, especially if you speak to them over a number of occasions where, they're kind of putting their best foot forward, but they start to feel comfortable with you, and they might let slip, some of the things that you're looking to disqualify them on. So it's a weird game. It's a weird world that we live in. And now, okay, but let's look at the cons, right? We look at the pros of working on an hourly basis. You have flexibility. You're not boxed in. You are able to change requirements, add requirements, remove requirements, right? And you're also able to, this is what I would recommend too for larger projects, is you're able to build sort of an MVP, right? Let's call it a minimum lovable product. You have this huge, huge list of stuff you'd like to do. You're building this huge community, and it's got an app, it's got this and that and that. So ask yourself, are the core things, what are the essential elements of this project or this platform or this membership site or community or whatever that I can launch to start giving people value right away, right? That people would sort of want to use. Because it's very easy to convince yourself that, like, if I don't launch my membership site with a community and a mobile app and like text notifications and 100 email automation sequence and this and this and this and this and that, I'm going to miss out, and people are going to not join, or they're going to quit very quickly. And the truth is, in my experience, it's actually usually just a small handful of things that people sign up for in the first place, and all the other stuff that you think is super important is actually negligible. Generally, what people care about, at least membership site land, is not even the static content. Even if you've got good training content and your website is about training or teaching something, static content is a given. You're going to have it there because it's kind of the core thing that people ostensibly sign up for. But what they really stay for is a community, some kind of engagement and sort of a community vibe, and going on a journey together with other people, and access to you if you're in any way involved with your brand personally, and people see your face and hear your voice, they're going to want access to you for better and for worse, even if you don't want to sort of do it, but that's what they want. And the best way to scale that is through group coaching, group calls. And so really that's like what people sign up and stay for. All this other peripheral stuff is just that most of the time. And my business coach, James Shremko, he talks about this a lot. I mean, he has the simplest, most minimalistic business model maybe in the world. He has a membership, 2 memberships actually. And his lower tier membership is a online community with a weekly group call with dozens of people in there. And then he has a higher tier membership, which I'm a part of, which is kind of a mastermind feel, which is literally just the group calls. In fact, you lose access to the community and you lose access to all of the trainings. It's just you get less, but in order to do more, you have to do less. And so it's that kind of thing, is that it takes time, I think, to discover what are the essentials that your members actually care about, what really gives them the value, what's the 80-20 there, or the 90-10 even. But it's not like everything, right? You don't need all of those things to launch, right? So if you can, long story short here, is if you can just do the minimum amount that will give people some value, build that out with your developer or with your agency, launch that and start getting customers, start getting money coming in, you will have sort of the enthusiasm and the justification to keep going. And then you have real people that you can ask. You can survey them and say, hey, what would you like? Or you can observe their behavior on the site and listen to their posts on the forum or their support tickets or whatever, or get their input on group coaching calls or on private coaching calls and say, hey, what would you like more? What would make this more valuable for you? And essentially talk to them, interact with them, and they will tell you not only what they want, but what form it should come in, what wording to use in the sales copy to pitch it to them, to sell it to them. I mean, they'll literally tell you what they want and what they need. Not always. Sometimes you have to read in between the lines, right? It's the old, I almost said Harrison Ford, the old Henry Ford cliche that if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse and buggy. But in this area, I think it's a little bit of a different conversation, right? Because we're not building a completely new, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're just trying to figure out how the people in your audience, in your community, get value from you most efficiently and in a way that suits them best. And there's a lot of different like WhatsApp groups, Telegram groups, Facebook groups, live events, group coaching. There's just so many different ways, and completely depends on your area. You know, crypto is all about Telegram groups and Discord groups. But yeah, there's like a vibe, a culture associated with certain industries, with certain niches, where they prefer one style over another. You know, some things you can't do group coaching calls, some things, you know, so it's going to be up to you. But if you take this sort of step-by-step MVP hourly approach, you don't box yourself in with fixed price projects that are just going to wind up putting you in a hostage situation anyway, and you have a good relationship, a partner whom you trust that you're working with, then that is how you're going to get the best results. So I hope that helps. If you have any questions, please let me know. Cheers.